was really a remarkable opportunity, remarkable because we haven't had many of them, to hear directly from Elon Musk as he discusses his government role. Of course, he's been at cabinet meetings, he's been in the Oval Office and spoken to reporters occasionally, but in this moment in the Roosevelt Room with other reporters, he was really opening up much more about what he's done over the last 100 or so days, leading the DOGE effort, the Department of Government Efficiency program that he's been running for President Trump. And, he spoke quite colorfully about, the experience, not just the $160 billion in government savings that he says he's been able to root out with this program and cut. He told us about flying on Air Force One, about staying in the Lincoln bedroom at the president's request, and even tucking into, ice cream from the White House fridge. So it was really remarkable. It told us a lot about, I think, his access to the president, about his status really in Trump's orbit, even as he is making this retreat from the White House.
Well, Jennifer, on that retreat, investors cheered the news last week in Tesla that he would be spending more time away from Washington, D.C. Now we're hearing he'll have this micro office. What can you tell us about how much time he will be in D.C. or how much time he'll be spending on DOGE moving forward?
Right. He told us that he anticipates spending about 1 to 2 days a week on average, and coming into Washington, D.C. basically once every other week. So you could see a situation where he's in town for 3 days working and then comes back a couple weeks later. This is, of course, a marked contrast from the beginning of the term when, it was an all hands on deck situation, really intense, as he described it. And he would spend, 7 days a week here sometimes, working just to get into these agencies and start figuring out a plan for accessing data and examining their spending.
Max, I want to bring you in. You're listening to Jen talk about this conversation, kind of him talking about his time in the White House. And I think we were all glued to the cabinet meeting where he had the two hats on, took them off, and he got kind of serious, it felt like.
Yeah, tonally kind of a valedictory tone. I don't know. The messaging is a little bit confusing because on one hand, he's saying, taking steps back. On the other hand, 1 to 2 days a week is that's a lot of days. Right. This is a guy who is running simultaneously 5 companies. He's got a lot of responsibilities, even if he is, as Jen says, scaling down from spending like all his time in Washington and spending a significant chunk of time in Washington.
Yeah, so on that, Jennifer, the timing that he's doing here, also the figures of $160 billion, I think, getting a lot of attention, especially earlier this year when, or maybe even a few months ago, when we heard that $2 trillion was his goal of cutting from the government. Have we learned if that goal was over a 10-year period, over a 5-year period, or how the $160 billion sort of fits into that goal, or if that goal has changed?
What we do know is that the ambition is clearly being ratcheted downward. And while he is not willing to forego reaching, a $1 trillion target, he wouldn't rule that out completely. He did say that doing so on any basis would require a lot of, willpower from elected officials. And he's just not sure that the willpower is there. He wouldn't rule it out, but it did seem very much like a concession that he's gotten a lot of the easier, lower hanging fruit, and that this is hard to do on an enduring basis. And by the way, I'll just say on his time here, he is limited as a special government employee to 130 days of service per calendar year.
And it was $2 trillion, in fact, was his original claim. And that was an annual number. That's the budget deficit. When he was at Madison Square Garden before the election, Howard Lutnick asked him how much he was going to cut the deficit. He said easily $2 trillion or something along those lines. So it's a huge difference and really an unusual, just for Elon Musk. This is somebody who is kind of used to projecting dominance, who just tends to go from victory to victory to victory. This is a come down. I mean, and he's doing his best. And I think that's part of why you're seeing these media availabilities, this effort to to actually have a voice in the story, because it's a failure, at least in the terms that he set for what he was trying to do.
Jen, before we let you go, I mean, should we assume that Elon will still have a voice or have the president's ear ongoing, even though he maybe isn't physically at the White House? There are limitations, right? How many days he can serve the government in this capacity, that he will still pick up the phone, the president will still pick up the phone, there will be that constant communication, or has something changed in that relationship?
There's all the indications are that he will continue to have this status around the president. I mean, he's clearly had altercations and disagreements with members of the administration, and it is perhaps one of the only folks who can do that right now. He's, as we noted at the top of this conversation, he's got a micro office in the West Wing of the White House, and he's not giving that up. Office space in this building is pretty difficult to come by, and that alone is an indication of the fact that he has stature with the president, and that seems to be enduring.